Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are tackling a really fundamental topic, undertaking a massive structural deep dive into the future of agriculture.
Foundational is the right word. It's a sector that underpins so much,
Yeah.
yet it's facing some pretty serious structural strains.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to give you, our listener, a detailed kind of actionable blueprint. We'll look at the policy challenges, the essential inputs, and the strategic reforms needed to genuinely modernize agriculture.
And the stakes are incredibly high. This isn't just some niche economic chat.
No, not at all.
Our sources highlight that agriculture directly impacts, 46.1% of the population, contributes 16% of GDP,
Wow, nearly half the population.
and it's deeply intertwined with global goals. Think about the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Agriculture influences 11 out of the 17.
So if you're talking poverty reduction, equitable growth, inclusive growth.
You have to start with agriculture.
Yeah.
You have to fix agriculture first. It's that central.
Okay, let's unpack that significance a bit more because it really does hit the core of our political and social structure, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
This sector is a political lightning rod. We see its influence tied to major fault lines, things like regionalism, for example.
Yeah, and the lingering issues around naxalism, which often trace back to land disputes, stalled reforms.
Right. And then there's the constant churn of subsidy politics, loan waivers popping up around election time, massive farmer protests we've seen. It's always in the headlines.
It dictates the stability, really, of the whole system. And to understand how we got to this point, the sources draw a really sharp contrast between two foundational economic strategies.
China versus India, right, in terms of structural transformation?
Exactly. Let's look at China first. They chose what the sources call the agricultural reforms first model. It's essentially a bottom-up approach.
Okay, so what did that mean on the ground? What did they actually do?
Well, they put the initial policy focus and investment squarely on the agrarian sector. They worked to increase farm incomes first. And crucially, this generated a domestic surplus, both capital and labor.
Ah, okay, so that surplus then fuels the next stage.
Precisely. That surplus flowed outwards, feeding industrialization. They built the internal wealth, the stability, the demand needed for their manufacturing sector to then take off globally.
So agricultural success wasn't just a side effect of industry. It was actually the prerequisite. It built the foundation.
It was the engine. It provided raw materials, yes, but also that critical domestic market. Now contrast that with the Indian experience.
We went top down, didn't we? Prioritizing the service sector, especially after liberalization.
We did. And while the service sector delivered high GDP growth rates, which looks great on paper, but it has low employment elasticity. It just doesn't absorb the huge numbers of people moving out of rural areas looking for work.
That's the jobless growth phenomenon we hear so much about, the core structural flaw.
That's exactly. Because the manufacturing sector didn't develop at the same pace, and because those comprehensive agrarian reforms we needed kind of stalled.
We never generated that rural surplus.
We never generated that necessary rural surplus, nor enough non-farm jobs to absorb the labor. And the direct result, massive income disparity. Millions remain dependent on farming that just isn't remunerative. It perpetuates structural poverty.
So we're really talking about fixing a structural imbalance that's been decades in the making.
Decades, yes.
Okay. So that sets our mission for this deep dive. We need to unpack the entire value chain, starting with the basics, the foundational inputs like land and water, moving through technology, finance, and all the way to market reforms.
With the single overarching goal, highlighted in the source material, achieving a sustained, dignified increase in farmer income.
All right, let's start with the absolute basic input. Land, the constraints here are, well, they're pretty stark when you look at the numbers.
They really are. The country has, 2.41% of the world's land area,
Tiny fraction.
but supports over 18% of the global population. The pressure is immense. But the real issue isn't just the overall amount of land. It's how it's owned and structured.
And that structure is defined by one word: fragmentation. Let's really try and visualize the scale of this. The sources say 89% of farms are small and marginal.
89%. And that means farms between 0.0002 and 2 hectares.
So 5 acres or less, often.
Often less, and crucially, often not in one single plot. It might be broken up into several small, non-contiguous strips scattered across a village.
Which makes modern farming incredibly difficult.
It fundamentally prevents economies of scale. You simply cannot justify investing in, say, a tractor or a combine harvester or advanced irrigation for two tiny separate plots of land.
So if you can't mechanize efficiently, you're stuck with high labor costs, massive inefficiency, low yields.
And ultimately, agriculture that is non-remunerative, it's just not sustainable financially for the farmer.
But historically, the push for land reforms wasn't just about economics, was it? There was a huge social justice dimension.
Oh, absolutely. It was deeply rooted in that. Land reforms were seen as essential for equitable distribution, for dismantling centuries-old patterns of caste-driven land ownership.
And fulfilling constitutional mandates, too.
Yes. Specifically, the Directive Principles of State Policy, DPSPs 39B and 39C, which explicitly call for equitable distribution of resources and preventing the concentration of wealth.
Okay, so we had these major historical reform efforts. Let's quickly run through them. Zamindari abolition, how did that go?
That was probably the most successful on paper. It transformed roughly 20 million tenants into landowners, which is a huge number. There was broad social consensus against the zamindari system.
But there were challenges.
Immediate challenges. Zamindaris used legal loopholes, particularly the personal cultivation clause. They claimed vast tracts were for their own farming, evading the abolition laws. Plus, there was significant legal resistance in the courts for years.
Okay. Then tenancy reforms aimed at giving security to the actual tiller of the land. The general view is these largely failed.
Largely, yes. Two main reasons. First, so much tenancy was undocumented, just based on verbal agreements.
Leaving it easy to deny.
Very easy for landowners to deny the tenant's status. Second, landowners frequently misused their right to resume land for supposed personal cultivation, leading to mass evictions. Add to that the incredibly poor state official land records at the time.
So the reforms just couldn't be implemented effectively?
They never really achieved that core goal of security of tenure for the vast majority of tenants.
And the third big one? Land ceilings. Putting a limit on how much land one person could own. We hear about successes in Kerala, West Bengal, with Operation Barga.
Yes, there were notable successes, particularly where political will was strong, like West Bengal's Operation Barga, securing sharecropper rights. But nationally, the challenges were formidable.
Constitutional hurdles initially.
Initially, yes, because the right to property was a fundamental right back then until '78. But even after that, the ceiling limits themselves were often set very high in many states, making them almost meaningless.
And then there was the issue of evasion tactics.
Right, the most notorious being the rise of bogus cooperatives.
The loophole where landowners created fake co-ops on paper.
Exactly. Since the ceiling often applied to individuals, wealthy landowners would transfer excess land to these fictional cooperatives or trusts, often run by family members or employees, just to bypass the limits while keeping effective control.
So the fundamental problem, fragmentation, poor records, it persists. What's the approach now? What's the way forward?
It's all about modernization, specifically digital modernization. The National Land Records Modernization Program, the NLRMP, is absolutely critical here.
Aiming for clear, undisputed titles.
Clear titles, digitized records, that's being coupled with schemes like Swamitva.
Using drones to map villages.
Exactly. Using drone tech to map inhabited rural areas, go on a Badis, and provide property cards, records of rights. The big idea is to create a unique farmer ID linked to geo-referenced land parcels.
Which unlocks other things, like credit.
Precisely. This digitization is the key to unlocking formal credit, investment, and better planning. We should also mention movements like Bhudan and Gramdan.
The voluntary land gift movements.
Yes, politically very significant, non-violent, but often the land donated was of poor quality, disputed, or arid. So while noble, they didn't always achieve real economic justice on a large scale.
Okay, moving from land to arguably the most critical resource, water. And the picture painted by the sources here is, frankly, it's quite alarming.
It is genuinely dire. The projection is that by 2030, potentially 50% of the country's total water demand might go unmet. Half.
That's a staggering figure. Are we already in a crisis situation?
We're deep in the stress zone. The standard international benchmark, the Falkenmark Index, says anything below 1,700 cubic meters per person per year indicates water stress.
And where are we?
India's per capita availability plummeted from over 5,000 cubic meters in 1951 down to just 1,544 by 2011. And it's projected to fall further, maybe to 1,140 cubic meters by 2050.
That trend line is just catastrophic for a growing population and economy.
It really is. And the main driver of this crisis, especially in agriculture, groundwater overexploitation.
Right. The Miller-Shaw Committee flagged this 60% of districts facing overexploitation. And groundwater makes up, what, 62% of agricultural water use?
That's right, a huge proportion.
So why are we mining our groundwater reserves so aggressively?
Primarily, it's distorted incentives. Power subsidies are the big one.
Free or cheap electricity for pumping.
Exactly. When electricity for pumping groundwater is heavily subsidized or free, it removes any cost incentive for farmers to conserve water. It encourages drilling more and deeper tube wells and running them unsustainably.
Basically mining ancient aquifers for free. It's economic irrationality driving environmental collapse.
That's a good way to put it. And it's compounded by a critical crop imbalance.
We're growing the wrong crops in the wrong places.
Precisely. We're pushing water-guzzling monocultures, rice, wheat, and especially sugarcane in regions that are already water-stressed or semi-arid.
Sugarcane is the prime example, isn't it?
It really is. Occupies maybe 3–7% of the land, but consumes something like 60% of the irrigation water budget in some areas. It's completely disproportionate.
And this ties into the concept of virtual water. Explain that a bit.
Yeah, it's a crucial concept. When you export a product, like rice or sugar or cotton, you're also exporting the massive amount of water that was embedded in its production.
Thousands of liters for a kilo of rice, potentially.
Potentially, yes. And India is a net exporter of this virtual water, contributing about 24% of the total global trade in it.
So we're essentially exporting our own water scarcity.
We're trading short-term export earnings for long-term water security. It's a bad trade. And making matters worse, organizationally, we have what the sources call institutional hydroschizophrenia.
That's a memorable term. What does it mean in practice?
It means we treat surface water, like rivers and canals and groundwater, as two completely separate things managed by different bodies.
The Central Water Commission for surface, Central Groundwater Board for groundwater?
Exactly. They operate in bureaucratic silos, often with conflicting approaches. You can't manage a river basin effectively without considering the aquifer beneath it. They're part of the same hydrological cycle.
So this disconnect hinders any kind of integrated planning.
It makes coordinated basin-level management almost impossible, which is why solutions often fail on the ground.
So the strategic shift needed, as the economic survey put it, is from land productivity to water productivity. Focus on efficiency.
Absolutely. And the non-negotiable technology for that is micro-irrigation drip and sprinkler systems.
The Dalwhite panel mandated its adoption, didn't they? Citing huge potential savings.
Huge savings. Potential for 40% water saving, maybe 45% boost in productivity, and crucially, up to a 50% increase in farmer income. The benefits are crystal clear.
But adoption is still low, only around 21–22% of irrigated land. Why the gap?
High initial cost is a major barrier for small farmers. Accessing finance for it can be difficult, and sometimes there's a lack of proper training and extension support on how to use and maintain the systems effectively.
Which brings us back to governance. We need better management and execution.
Yes. There's a strong case for a unified National Water Commission, perhaps merging the CWC and CGWB to manage water holistically.
Centralized planning, maybe?
Centralized oversight and planning, but decentralized execution. Policy needs to strongly promote participatory management, empowering local water user associations, WUAs, or models like the Pani Panchayats in Odisha.
Giving them ownership.
Giving them ownership and responsibility for irrigation management transfer, IMT, managing the final distribution and even pricing of water within their local area. When farmers have a direct stake, they're far more likely to conserve.
All right, let's shift to chemical inputs. Fertilizers are essential, but we have a major problem with imbalance, right?
A fundamental imbalance. The scientifically recommended ratio for NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium is ideally around 4.2.1 for most soils.
But what's the actual consumption ratio?
It's wildly skewed, something like 7.2, 0.8, 0.1, way too much nitrogen.
And that's almost entirely driven by urea.
Yes, urea is the main nitrogenous fertilizer, and it accounts for something like 82% of all nitrogen fertilizer consumption.
Why the heavy skew towards urea?
Subsidies. Urea has historically been much more heavily subsidized than P and K fertilizers. So, from a pure cost perspective, farmers are incentivized to overuse nitrogen.
What does that overdose of nitrogen actually do to the soil and the crop long term?
Well, initially you get rapid green growth, which looks good, but excessive nitrogen hinders the plant's ability to absorb other vital nutrients like phosphorus and potassium. It creates deficiencies, locks up other nutrients in the soil, and ultimately lowers long-term soil health and productivity.
And economically, these subsidies are a huge drain.
Massive fiscal strain on the government budget. Plus, we import a lot of urea, so it hits our balance of payments. And it faces scrutiny internationally under WTO rules regarding agricultural subsidies the de minimis limits.
Then there are the environmental consequences, which are pretty severe. Soil degradation, obviously, but also water pollution.
Huge issue. Nitrogen and phosphorus runoff from fields into rivers and lakes causes eutrophication.
That's the excessive algae growth that kills fish.
Exactly. Nutrient overload leads to algal blooms that deplete oxygen, creating dead zones. Plus, residues can lead to bioaccumulation in the food chain, potentially affecting consumer health down the line.
And isn't there diversion too? Subsidized urea being used for other things?
Yes, that's another problem. Diversion for non-agricultural industrial uses, or smuggled across borders. The subsidy creates all sorts of distortions.
So the policy direction has to be about shifting from just subsidizing quantity to promoting precision and balance. What are the key initiatives?
We've seen several attempts. The nutrient-based subsidy, NBS, was introduced to link subsidies to the nutrient content, trying to balance things out, though urea was kept out initially, which limited its impact.
What else?
Mandatory neem coating of urea was a significant step. The coating slows down the release of nitrogen, improving efficiency and reducing runoff. And the One Nation, One Fertilizer scheme aims to standardize branding and curb diversion.
But the big technological leap seems to be nanofertilizers.
That's the game changer, potentially. Specifically, nanourea liquid.
Explain the efficiency gain there. It sounds dramatic.
It really is. The sources emphasize this. Just 500 milliliters, half a liter bottle of nanourea liquid can apparently replace a whole 45-kilogram bag of conventional urea.
Wow, that's a massive reduction in volume.
Huge. Think about the benefits for logistics, storage, handling, and especially for precise application, like spraying with drones. It's a major step towards sustainability.
But even with better products, it comes down to how farmers use them.
Exactly. Which is why the ultimate goal is precision use. This means scientific application based on actual soil needs.
Using tools like soil health cards.
Soil health cards are key, providing farmers with specific recommendations for their fields, and promoting integrated nutrient management practices combining chemical, organic, and biological sources. Schemes like PKVY, Paramparagad Krishi Vikas Yoshana, for organic farming, and the more controversial zero-budget natural farming, ZBNF, touch on this.
And adopting best practices from elsewhere.
Yes, adopting philosophies like the 4R nutrient stewardship framework, used successfully in places like Canada, applying the right fertilizer source at the right rate, at the right time, and in the right place. Precision is everything.
Okay, next input. Seeds. The genetic foundation. Good quality seeds can contribute, what, 15% to the total output?
Around that, yes, it's a critical factor. But we have a major issue with the quality and type of seeds being used widely.
Which is related to the seed replacement rate.
Exactly. The seed replacement rate, the percentage of area sown with certified, high-quality seeds rather than farm-saved seeds, is really low, only about 20% nationally.
Meaning 80% is sown with seeds the farmer saved from the previous harvest.
Or seeds sourced informally. Around 60–65% is estimated to be farm-saved. Now, saving seeds is a traditional practice and economically sensible for the farmer in the short run.
But the quality degrades.
Over time, yes. Farm-saved seeds are often genetically older, they lose vigor, accumulate diseases, and are much less resistant to new pests or climate stresses compared to modern certified varieties. This leads to lower yields overall.
So policy needs to encourage uptake of better seeds, but also protect farmers' rights regarding seeds. It sounds like a balancing act.
It is, and the key legislation here is the Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Rights Act, the PPV&FR Act of 2001.
How does that balance things?
It grants intellectual property rights to plant breeders for new varieties, incentivizing R&D. But crucially, it also explicitly protects the farmer's right to save, use, sow, resow, exchange, or even sell farm produce, including seeds of a protected variety, just not under the breeder's brand name.
So it tries to protect both innovation and traditional practices.
That's the aim. And to tackle the problem of fake or substandard seeds flooding the market, we're seeing digital solutions emerge.
Like the Sathi portal.
Yes. The Sathi portal is designed for seed traceability, authentication, and inventory management. It uses QR codes to track seeds right from production to the retail point, aiming to curb the menace of spurious seeds.
Okay, let's shift to pesticides. And here, the human cost mentioned in the sources is just sobering.
It's devastating. The figure cited is 33,000 pesticide poisoning cases annually in India. And tragically, that India accounts for something like 60% of global deaths from unintentional pesticide poisoning.
60% globally. That's shocking. What's driving this? Is it purely misuse, or are there systemic issues?
It's a combination, but the governance system is definitely part of the problem. It's fragmented.
How so? Explain that split governance.
Well, the central government is responsible for registering new pesticides, deciding which ones are safe enough to be used.
Okay, the initial approval.
Right. But then it's the state governments that are responsible for issuing licenses to dealers, regulating sales within the state, and enforcing rules on the ground.
And that creates gaps.
Huge gaps. We have far too few pesticide testing laboratories, high vacancy rates for technical staff in those labs, and often very weak monitoring of dealers and actual field practices. Enforcement is patchy.
And on the farmer's side, practice is often driven by reaction rather than prevention.
Often, yes. Lack of access to reliable, timely information about pest cycles or economic threshold levels, the point at which pest damage justifies the cost of spraying.
So they spray reactively.
They tend to spray based on seeing visible damage, often applying excessive quantities after an infestation is already severe, rather than strategically applying the right dose at the right time, or even deciding not to spray if the pest level is below the threshold.
So the way forward involves better practices and alternatives,
Absolutely. The strategic approach has to be integrated pest management IPM.
which treats pesticides as a last resort.
Exactly. IPM emphasizes monitoring, using biological controls, like introducing Gambusia fish to eat mosquito larvae in paddy fields, or botanical pesticides like neem-based extracts first. Chemical pesticides are only used when necessary and according to strict guidelines.
And promoting basic safety.
Basic safety literacy is crucial. Campaigns like Read the Label First, educating farmers on correct dosage, safe handling, proper protective gear, and safe waiting periods before harvest. Early surveillance and warning systems are also key.
Okay, let's move to the cutting edge and often controversial topic. Genetic modification, GM crops. Can you give us a very simple explanation of the basic technology?
Sure. At its core, genetic engineering involves identifying a specific gene that provides a desirable trait, say pest resistance or drought tolerance.
Okay.
Scientists use molecular tools like restriction enzymes, often called endonucleases, to precisely cut out that gene of interest.
Like molecular scissors.
Exactly. Then, they insert this gene into the DNA of the target plant cell, often using a vector like a modified bacterium, agrobacterium, or virus to carry the gene in.
And the plant grown from that modified cell carries the new trait.
That's the idea. The potential advantages are significant.
Such as?
Higher yields, definitely.
Hmm.
But also, crucially, tolerance to stresses. Biotic stress like pests and diseases, and abiotic stress that means things like drought, salinity, extreme temperatures.
Which is incredibly relevant for climate change resilience.
Hugely relevant, and potentially reducing our dependence on imports for things like edible oils if we could develop high-yielding GM oilseeds.
But the controversy surrounding GM is just as significant as the promise. Let's start with the socioeconomic risks,
There's a real and understandable fear of creating genetic haves and have-nots.
where small farmers get left behind.
If they can't afford the potentially more expensive GM seeds or associated technology fees, yes, it could widen the gap. There are also major concerns about corporate control over the food chain.
The whole issue around trait fees, like Monsanto charging for the boot gene.
Exactly. Trait fees, or the fear, though largely hypothetical so far, of so-called terminator genes that would supposedly render harvested seeds sterile, forcing farmers to buy new seeds every single year. These fuel anxieties about farmer dependency.
And the environmental risks, they seem potentially irreversible.
That's the core concern. Once released, genetically modified organisms can interact with the environment in unpredictable ways.
Risks like?
Potential harm to non-target organisms, beneficial insects like pollinators, for example, the risk of gene flow to wild relatives, creating superweeds, and the long-term impact on biodiversity if vast areas are planted with just a few GM varieties. These changes could be irreversible.
So who makes the call on allowing these crops? Who regulates this?
The main regulatory body in India is the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, GEAC. It operates under the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change.
And what's the current status? What GM crops are actually allowed?
Currently, only one GM crop is approved for commercial cultivation. BT cotton, which contains a gene from the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis to resist bollworm pests.
What about others, like GM mustard?
DMH11, a genetically modified mustard hybrid developed by Delhi University, has received clearance from the GAC regarding its environmental safety. However, the final decision on its commercial release is still pending with the government due to ongoing debates and legal challenges.
So, given the huge potential benefits but also the significant risks, what's the sensible path forward? We can't just ignore the technology.
No, we can't. The approach needs to be cautious, science-based, and transparent, prioritizing rigorous, independent, long-term biosafety research before any large-scale release is non-negotiable.
And transparency for consumers.
Absolutely. Mandatory labeling of GM food products is essential so consumers can make informed choices. Traceability systems are also needed.
The economic survey a few years back had a recommendation.
Yes, the 2017-18 survey suggested a pragmatic approach, perhaps focusing initial GM development efforts on non-food crops first, or on traits like improved nutritional value, disease resistance, or enhanced shelf life, rather than just herbicide tolerance or insect resistance in major food staples. This could help build public confidence and technological capacity while managing perceived risks.
Okay, let's talk finance. Access to credit is the lifeblood for farmers, season after season. But the sources highlight a massive disparity in access to formal credit.
It's incredibly unequal. The data is stark. 89% of farmers are small and marginal, right?
Right.
Well, this group has access to less than 50% of the formal agricultural credit they actually need. They're heavily reliant on informal sources.
Which means higher interest rates, vulnerability.
Exactly. Money lenders, input dealers,
Okay.
much more exploitative terms. And this disparity isn't just by farm size, it's also regional.
Where's the credit flowing?
Disproportionately to the southern region, which accounts for something like 40% of agricultural credit dispersal, while vast areas like the central region get maybe only 13%. Huge imbalance.
What are the core challenges preventing smallholders from accessing formal loans?
The biggest one comes back to land. The absence of clear, undisputed land records.
No collateral.
If you don't have a clear title document, you can't offer your land as collateral, which is what banks usually require. This automatically excludes huge numbers of farmers.
Especially tenants and laborers.
Exactly. Landless laborers, sharecroppers, tenant farmers, they're almost entirely shut out from the formal system. Another major issue is the diversion of loans earmarked for agriculture into non-agricultural businesses or consumption.
So the money isn't always reaching the farm.
Not always. Enforcement and tracking are weak.
What policies or schemes are working to improve financial inclusion?
The Kizan Credit Card (KCC) scheme has been significant. It aims to provide farmers with timely, adequate short-term credit through a simple card mechanism.
Kind of like a credit card for farm inputs.
Essentially, yes.
Right.
Another important one is the Modified Interest Subvention Scheme, or MIS-ISS.
How does that work? It's not just a flat subsidy.
No, it's smarter. It offers short-term crop loans up to a certain limit at a subsidized interest rate. But the key part is, it provides an additional interest subvention, making the loan even cheaper, specifically for farmers who repay their loans promptly, on time.
Ah, so it rewards good credit behavior.
Exactly. It incentivizes timely repayment, which helps improve the overall credit culture and reduces NPAs for banks. There's also the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, which is more recent, providing longer-term debt financing for post-harvest management projects and community farming assets.
Let's circle back to a crucial point we touched on earlier, the investment gap versus subsidies. The Ashok-Dalwai panel set a target for doubling farmer income, requiring investment growth of 12.5% per year.
That's right, a huge increase needed in capital formation.
Yet public investment in agriculture has been relatively stagnant or low, while private investment makes up the bulk, around 75%.
Correct. And this ties directly into the discussion about subsidies versus investment.
The return on investment argument.
It's incredibly compelling. The sources cite studies showing that the return on investment in agricultural research and development, R&D, is massive, something like 11 times the investment.
11x return. That's huge.
Compare that to the return on subsidies, especially input subsidies like fertilizer or power. The return there is often less than 1, maybe 0.88x. You get less back than you put in terms of broad economic growth.
So from a purely economic efficiency standpoint,
The government's money is far, far better spent on long-term investments like R&D, irrigation infrastructure, market development, and extension services, rather than on recurring market-distorting subsidies. Yet politically, subsidies are often easier. That's the policy dilemma. #7, Agricultural Extension Services, AES.
okay, let's talk about the Knowledge Link Agricultural Extension Services, AES. These are meant to be the bridge between the lab and the land, right?
Traditionally, yes. The old definition was basically transferring technology and know-how from agricultural universities and research stations directly to the farmer's field.
But that definition has evolved.
It has, or at least it needs to. The new definition, as pushed by bodies like the Dalwai panel, sees extension much more broadly,
How so?
as an empowering system. It's not just about telling farmers what to do, but about sharing information, knowledge, skills, helping them organize, connecting them across the entire supply chain, from inputs to markets,
Right.
ultimately enabling them to make better decisions and earn higher net incomes.
That sounds much more holistic, but the system delivering this is, well, it seems broken. The human resource deficit is alarming.
It's staggering. The farmer-to-extension functionary ratio, according to the Dawai panel, is something like 1,156 farmers for every one extension worker.
1,100 to 1. That's impossible.
It basically guarantees failure. One person simply cannot effectively serve that many farmers spread across multiple villages.
And this explains the constraints we see in practice.
Absolutely. It leads to a very top-down management approach, often with generic advice that isn't tailored to specific local soil conditions or farmer needs. There's very little genuine farmer participation in setting the agenda.
And the scope of advice is too narrow.
Far too narrow. The overwhelming focus is still on the pre-production stage: what variety to plant, when to sow, fertilizer application.
What about after the crop is grown?
There's inadequate attention paid to crucial post-production aspects: advice on optimal harvesting times and techniques, proper on-farm storage, grading, basic processing, understanding market trends, accessing market information, aggregation, the whole value chain after planting.
And private extension services, do they fill the gap?
They do fill some gaps, often linked to input companies or agribusinesses, but their advice can sometimes be driven by commercial interests promoting specific products rather than purely the farmer's best interest. Quality and neutrality can be concerns.
So rejuvenating this system is critical. How do we fix it? How do we bring down that 1156.1 ratio?
It requires serious investment, massive capacity building for existing staff, hiring many more qualified functionaries, rejuvenating structures like the Agricultural Technology Management Agency, ATMA, which was designed to be a more decentralized, farmer-centric system.
And broadening the scope.
Crucially, yes, extension must expand its mandate to cover the entire supply chain, especially post-production management and market linkages. And leveraging technology is key.
ICT interventions.
Yes, things like dedicated platforms like the Kisan TV channel, broadcasting localized, relevant information, web portals like the Farmers Portal providing information services, mobile apps delivering timely advice. Technology has to be part of the solution to bridge the manpower gap. #8, e-technology in aid of farmers.
That leads nicely into e-technology. Digital tools have the potential to be a great equalizer, connecting farmers to information and markets.
The potential is immense, though actual agri-tech penetration, according to a recent E&Y report, is still quite low in India, maybe around 1.5%.
But internet usage in rural areas is growing rapidly.
Very rapidly. Around 55% of internet users are now rural, so the infrastructure and user base are increasingly there. The challenge is developing and deploying relevant, user-friendly applications.
Let's talk about the foundational piece AgriStack. What exactly is it aiming to achieve?
AgriStack is envisioned as the core digital infrastructure for agriculture. Think of it as the backbone.
Not just one single app.
No, much more than that. The goal is to create a federated national farmers database, assigning every farmer a unique digital ID.
A farmer ID.
Yes, and linking this ID to digitized, geo-referenced land records, basically knowing exactly who owns or cultivates which plot of land.
So this connects all the dots we've been discussing. Land records, subsidies, credit.
That's the idea. If you have a verified farmer ID linked to specific land parcels, you can target subsidies much more effectively, prevent duplication and fraud, ghost beneficiaries, streamline loan applications and dispersals, track input usage. It integrates everything.
Okay, so AgriStack is the foundation. What about specific tools farmers can use across the value chain? Let's start with inputs and information.
We have established platforms like ITC's eChopal, which provides farmers with real-time weather forecasts, market prices, and scientific farming practices via village internet kiosks. There are government apps like Kisan Savita offering a range of information.
And on the production side, we're seeing more IoT and AI.
Definitely. A great example is the Nano Ganesh system.
What does that do?
It's a simple but brilliant IoT device. It allows farmers to remotely switch their irrigation pump sets on or off using a basic mobile phone call or app. Saves huge amounts of time, travel, electricity, and water.
Very practical. What else?
There are more sophisticated platforms like Phasal Mesh, which uses AI and on-farm sensors to provide hyper-localized advice on precise irrigation and fertigation schedules.
And drones are becoming big.
Huge potential. The Kisan Drone Initiative and the Drone Didi scheme are promoting drone use for tasks like mapping fields, monitoring crop health, precision spraying of pesticides and fertilizers. It improves efficiency and safety. We also see tools like Krushi Mapper for geofencing fields to better implement schemes.
Okay, what about post-production? Getting the produce to market efficiently.
The big government initiative here is ENAM, the National Agriculture Market.
The online trading platform.
Yes, it aims to create a unified national market by connecting existing APMC mandis online, allowing farmers to sell produce to buyers across the country, theoretically improving price discovery.
And platforms for logistics and payments.
We have AG MarkNet providing market information. There's CDP Suraksha for instant electronic dispersal of subsidies directly into farmer accounts. And private sector platforms like NinjaCart are using AI for sophisticated supply chain management, optimizing routes, managing cold chains, predicting demand, and drastically reducing intermediaries between the farm and the retailer.
Looking even further ahead, what are the really next-generation technologies the sources mention?
Well, beyond the biotechnology of GM crops we discussed, there's talk of quantum computing.
Really? How would that apply to farming?
The idea is using its immense processing power to optimize incredibly complex systems, like simulating weather patterns for hyperlocal forecasts, or optimizing intricate irrigation strategies and planting schedules for entire regions, considering countless variables.
Fascinating. And nanotechnology.
We already mentioned nanourea liquid and nanopesticides.
Yeah.
This miniaturization allows for much more targeted delivery of inputs, drastically reducing the quantities needed, minimizing environmental impact, and maximizing efficiency. It's a key driver of precision agriculture. Robotics for tasks like harvesting is also on the horizon. Okay, let's talk about institutions that help farmers aggregate and gain market power. Cooperatives are the classic model here.
Their structure seems designed to counter that fragmentation problem we started with.
Exactly. The core principles, voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, usually one member, one vote, economic participation by members, and concern for the community are inherently about empowering the smallholder.
And the textbook example of success is AMU in the dairy sector.
Absolutely. Operation Flood, which Amul spearheaded starting way back in the late 40s and ramping up in the 70s, is a world-renowned success story.
How did their model work?
It's a three-tiered, federated structure. Village-level dairy cooperative societies collect milk. These societies form district-level unions that process the milk, and these unions form a state-level federation responsible for marketing.
And the key was professional management alongside democratic control.
Crucial. Professional management, strong focus on quality control, efficient logistics, smart branding, and ensuring a fair share of the final price goes back to the farmer members. It proved that cooperatives can drive inclusive growth and profitability on a massive scale.
And we see that spirit continuing today, like IFFCO developing nanourea.
Yes, IFFCO, the Indian Farmers Fertilizer Cooperative, is another giant cooperative success, now innovating with products like nanourea. But perhaps the most vital link at the village level, especially for credit, is the PayCS.
Primary agricultural credit societies, they provide those essential short-term loans.
The lifeblood for many farmers to buy seeds and fertilizers each season. And now there's a big push to leverage their grassroots network for more services.
How are they being repurposed?
They're being developed into multi-service hubs. Many PayCS are being computerized and enabled to function as common service centers, CSCs, offering various government e-services. They're also being designated as PM Kisan Samriddhi Kendras, PMKSK.
Meaning they also sell inputs and offer advice.
Exactly. Broadening their scope beyond just credit to include selling fertilizers and seeds, providing soil testing facilities, offering small farm machinery rentals, and acting as key delivery points for government schemes and information, making them a one-stop shop at the village level.
But cooperatives haven't always been successful. They've faced governance issues historically.
Absolutely. That's the flip side. Challenges include the formation of bogus cooperatives we mentioned earlier, often just fronts for influential families to capture benefits or evade regulations.
Political interference.
Strong political interference and control in many co-ops, leading to mismanagement and inefficiency. And often, weak internal controls and poor auditing mechanisms have resulted in high non-performing assets, NPAs, especially in cooperative banks.
So reforms need to focus on strengthening governance.
Strengthening governance, ensuring genuine democratic control, Improving audit practices and professionalizing management are crucial, while still scaling up the proven successful models like AMUL, hashtag tag 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 Candao, Agricultural Produce Market Committees, APMC, and supply chain.
Let's turn to the markets themselves. The APMC system, the regulated mandis, were set up with a good intention, right? To protect farmers.
Yes, the original objective was sound. Farmers, especially smallholders, often lack bargaining power when dealing with traders individually.
So the APMC provided a designated space.
A regulated marketplace, the first point of sale for many crops. It was meant to ensure fair price discovery through open auctions, provide standard weights and measures, and also facilitate government procurement operations by agencies like the Food Corporation of India, FCI.
But over time, severe problems emerged. Operational flaws.
Big flaws. The primary one became the creation of monopolies or oligopolies within the
A
mandate.
freighter cartel.
Exactly. A limited number of licensed traders could form cartels, collude to suppress prices during auctions, and charge exorbitant commission fees. Farmers often had little choice but to sell to them within that specific mandate.
And the infrastructure within these mandis often didn't justify the fees charged.
Often not. High market fees were levied, but investment in basic infrastructure, proper storage facilities, cold storage, drying platforms, waste management, electronic weighing scales, was frequently lacking.
And the physical network is just too sparse.
Way too sparse. The official norm suggests there should be an APMC market within roughly an 80 square kilometer radius. The reality, on average, it's more like one APMC for every 472 square kilometers.
Well, farmers have to travel huge distances.
Long distances, increasing their transport costs, leading to more spoilage, especially for perishable goods. Plus, there's poor connectivity between mandis, both within states and across state lines, hindering the development of a truly national market.
So modernization efforts focus on breaking the monopoly and building alternative infrastructure.
That's the direction. Key initiatives include the promotion of the Model APLM Act, Agriculture, Produce, and Livestock Marketing Act of 2017.
What does that do?
It encourages states to provide farmers with freedom of choice, the option to sell their produce outside the designated APMC mandi, directly to processors, exporters, or retailers, or through alternative market channels.
Like ENAM.
ENAM is a major push trying to create that unified national e-market by linking existing mandis electronically, allowing for transparent online bidding, and also the creation of Gramin agricultural markets.
Smaller rural markets.
Essentially upgrading existing periodic rural markets, HAMBAs, into better-equipped aggregation points closer to the farm gate, reducing the need for farmers to travel all the way to the main APMC for smaller lots.
Let's look beyond the mandi at the whole supply chain. The current system is often described as broken.
Broken is a fair description for many commodities. Too many intermediaries between the farmer and the final consumer. Each intermediary adds a margin, increasing the final price, but the farmer often gets a very small share. Communication is poor, leading to mismatches between supply and demand. And wastage levels, especially for fruits and vegetables, are extremely high due to poor handling and lack of cold chain infrastructure.
Are there successful models that show a better way?
Yes, the sources highlight a couple.
Yes.
Safal, run by Mother Dairy in Delhi, is a good example of a farm-to-fork model for fruits and vegetables.
What makes it work?
They have their own collection centers, refrigerated trucks, controlled atmosphere storage, modern retail outlets. They manage the entire cold chain, minimize handling, bypass multiple middlemen, and offer farmers assured procurement and better prices based on quality grades.
And Maha Grapes, the grape cooperative.
Another excellent example, focused on exports. It's a cooperative of grape growers in Maharashtra. They focus intensely on quality control, right from the farm level. They coordinate harvesting, have common packing houses with pre-cooling and cold storage facilities, ensure traceability right back to the individual farm, and meet the stringent quality standards required for export markets, like Europe. This allows them to command premium prices, which benefits their farmer members directly. The key in both cases is integrated management and controlling the chain. Hashtag TAD11. Food processing industry, FPI. This connects directly to the food processing industry, FPI. It's absolutely crucial for tackling those post-harvest losses and, importantly, adding value to raw agricultural produce.
And it's a significant employer, too.
Very significant. Contributes about 12.8% of employment in the organized manufacturing sector. It's key for creating jobs, especially in rural and semi-urban areas.
India's production levels for raw materials are world-leading in many categories.
#1 globally in milk production. #1 in sugar. A leader in fruits and vegetables, spices, cereals. We produce enormous quantities.
but the value addition is where we fall short.
Dramatically short. The potential is massive, but largely untapped. The market size for processed food is projected to reach something like USD 535 billion, growing at over 15% annually. But our level of processing is very low compared to other major economies.
Give us some numbers on processing levels.
Milk processing is relatively better, around 21% maybe, but fruits, only about 4.5% get processed. Vegetables, even lower, maybe 2.7%. Most of it is sold fresh, leading to high seasonality, price volatility, and wastage.
So we're producing the raw material but not capturing the value from turning it into higher value products. Why is the processing level so low?
Several factors. A big one is the lack of adequate infrastructure, particularly cold chain logistics, storage and transport, which is essential for perishable goods.
Broken supply chains again.
Fragmented supply chains, yes. Difficulty in getting consistent quality and quantity of raw materials from small, scattered farms. Lack of access to credit for processors, especially SMEs. Complex regulations. Gaps in skilled manpower.
So to really boost this sector and capture that huge urban and export demand for processed food, we need a multi-pronged strategy. The sources use an acronym, PROCESS.
Yes, it's a neat way to summarize the key areas. P for policy, creating an enabling policy environment that encourages private sector participation and investment.
For regulation.
Streamlining regulations, maybe through a single window clearance system, making it easier to set up and operate processing units. O for operational synergy.
Linking different schemes and initiatives.
Exactly. Linking FPI promotion schemes with things like agricultural marketing reforms, infrastructure development like roads and power, skill development programs, Skill India, and ensuring backward linkages to farmer-producer organizations, FPOs, or schemes supporting specific crops like millets or horticulture, Mission for Integrated Development of Horticulture, MIDH.
And the final S.
Capturing the synergy between production and processing and meeting the growing sophisticated urban demand for convenient, safe, processed food products.
What are the flagship government initiatives driving this?
The main umbrella scheme is the PM Kisan Sampada Yojana. It supports the creation of modern infrastructure along the entire value chain.
Including mega food parks.
Yes, mega food parks are a key component. The idea is to create integrated zones with common facilities, cold storage, testing labs, processing units connecting farmers, processors, and retailers in one place to maximize value addition and minimize waste through a cluster-based approach. There's also the Production-Linked Incentive, PLI scheme, specifically for the food processing industry, aimed at boosting domestic manufacturing and exports by rewarding increased sales of processed food products.
To really understand where agriculture needs to go, we have to grapple with the legacy of the Green Revolution back in the 60s and 70s. It wasn't just about growing more food, was it?
Not at all. The context was critical. India was facing severe food shortages, dependent on food aid, particularly the PL480 program from the U.S.
Which came with political strings attached.
Absolutely. The U.S. could exert significant political leverage. So, achieving self-sufficiency in food grains became a matter of national security and sovereignty, not just feeding the population.
And in terms of production, it was a massive success.
Phenomenal success in its primary goal. Led by high-yielding varieties, HYVs, of wheat and rice, combined with irrigation, fertilizers, and pesticides, food grain production jumped dramatically, from around 74 million tons in the mid-60s to over 105 million tons by the early 70s.
And it did help reduce rural poverty.
Yes, particularly in the irrigated regions where it was initially focused, like Punjab, Haryana, Western UP. It averted famine and created a food surplus. But, it's a big but, it also created a host of new systemic problems.
Problems we are still dealing with today. Let's list them out.
Okay, first, the intense focus on just two crops, rice and wheat, led to a decline in the production diversity of pulses, millets, oilseeds, and it created huge regional disparities, heavily favoring the well-irrigated northern states over rain-fed eastern and southern regions.
Second major issue, the input intensity.
Right. The GR package relied heavily on chemical fertilizers, especially urea, and intensive irrigation. This led directly to the problems we discussed earlier, the fertilizer imbalance, soil degradation, and crucially, the massive over-extraction of groundwater, fueled by those power subsidies.
Environmental degradation was a direct consequence.
Widespread environmental degradation, water pollution from fertilizer and pesticide runoff, loss of biodiversity, soil health deterioration. Third, and perhaps more subtly, it cemented a policy regime focused on keeping food prices low for consumers.
Pro-consumer policies, how did that hurt farmers?
It led to what economists call adverse terms of trade for agriculture. Input costs for farmers, machinery, seeds, fertilizers kept rising, but the government often intervened to keep the output prices, the price farmers receive for their grain, relatively low to ensure cheap food for urban populations and for the public distribution system.
So farmers were caught in a cost-price squeeze, selling cheap, buying dear.
Perennially squeezed. This suppressed farm incomes over the long run, even as production increased, which is why many argue we now need a second green revolution or an evergreen revolution.
Focused on sustainability, not just yield.
Exactly. Focused on ecological sustainability, economic viability for farmers, nutritional security, and climate resilience. Hashtag tag 13, climate smart agriculture, CSA, and sustainability.
And that brings us squarely to climate change. It's not a future problem for farming, it's here now.
It's an immediate existential threat. Remember, 52% of India's cultivated area is still rain-fed, making millions of farmers incredibly vulnerable to changes in monsoon patterns, droughts, floods.
And rising temperatures directly impact yield.
Yes, studies consistently show that even a 1 or 2 degrees Celsius rise in temperature significantly reduces yields for key crops like rice and wheat, especially during critical growth stages. Pests and diseases are also changing their patterns.
So the response has to be climate smart agriculture, CSA. What are its core pillars?
CSA is built on 3 interconnected pillars. First, sustainably enhancing productivity and incomes. Second, enhancing resilience, adapting farms and farming systems to withstand climate shocks. And third, where possible, decreasing greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture mitigation.
We need specific technologies and practices that deliver on these pillars. What are some examples being deployed?
Zero tillage or conservation tillage is a key one. Using machines like the Happy Seeder in Punjab allows farmers to sow wheat directly into the residue of the previous rice crop without burning the stubble or plowing the field.
Benefits.
It saves water, reduces costs, improves soil health by retaining organic matter, and drastically cuts air pollution from stubble burning. Mulching, covering the soil surface with crop residue or plastic sheets, is another technique to conserve soil moisture and suppress weeds.
And coordinated research efforts.
Yes. Projects like Necessary, the National Innovations in Climate Resilient Agriculture Project by ICAR, are vital. They work on developing and demonstrating location-specific climate-resilient technologies and contingency plans across vulnerable districts.
This leads us to a really interesting, sometimes contentious approach. Zero-budget natural farming, ZBNF. Championed by Subhash Palekar.
Yes, ZBNF has gained a lot of attention. It's essentially a philosophy and set of practices for farming without any synthetic chemical inputs and with minimal water use, aiming for zero cost on purchased inputs, hence zero budget.
What are its main components, the 4 pillars?
The 4 pillars are: first, Jivarutha, using a fermented microbial culture made from dung and urine of indigenous Indian cow breeds, jaggery, pulse flour, and soil as a fertilizer and soil enricher.
Second.
Bijamrita, a microbial coating for seed treatment, again using cow dung and urine, to protect young plants from pests and diseases. Third, Akadana, which is mulching, using crop residues or cover crops to conserve soil moisture and build humus.
And fourth?
Wapasa, maintaining optimal soil moisture and aeration, ensuring water vapor is available to plants even with less liquid water. The core idea is rejuvenating natural soil processes.
The big appeal is obviously reducing input costs drastically. If farmers don't need to buy expensive fertilizers and pesticides.
Their cost of cultivation plummets, which could significantly boost net income, especially for small farmers, heavily indebted due to input costs. It also clearly has environmental benefits: no chemical runoff, improved soil biodiversity.
But if it's so beneficial, why isn't everyone doing it? There must be concerns or challenges.
There are significant debates and concerns, often flagged in research. The main one is about yields. While initial results can be good, some studies and farmer experiences report a decline in yields after the first couple of years of transition, especially compared to high-input conventional farming.
Which puts farmers under economic pressure.
Exactly. If yields drop significantly, even with lower costs, the impact on overall income can be negative, leading farmers to switch back. There are also questions about scalability, the labor involved in preparing the concoctions, and the heavy reliance specifically on indigenous cow breeds whose populations have declined.
So, the jury is still out on its universal applicability and long-term impact on income.
It's fair to say that while ZBNF offers valuable principles of low-input, ecological farming, more rigorous, long-term scientific validation across diverse agroclimatic zones is needed to fully understand its potential and limitations regarding yield stability and farmer income at scale. Policy needs to support research and pilots cautiously, #tag outro.
Okay, we've covered a huge amount of ground. Synthesizing this whole deep dive, I think the clearest takeaway is the sheer interconnectedness of it all. You can't just fix one part of the agricultural system.
Absolutely. Piecemeal reforms just won't cut it. True modernization demands tackling the entire ecosystem simultaneously.
Mhm.
You have to address land tenure fragmentation through digitization. You need to mandate water use efficiency via microirrigation.
Rebalance inputs away from urea using tech like nanourea, leverage data integration through things like AgriStack.
And fundamentally fix the post-production chain strengthening cooperatives, modernizing markets like the APMCs, boosting food processing. It all has to move together.
And that policy priority gap we discussed really stands out, doesn't it? The evidence seems overwhelming. Investing in R&D and infrastructure and extension gives you far greater long-term returns 11 times, according to the sources compared to short-term fixes like input subsidies.
The strategic focus has to shift away from just providing temporary relief towards building long-term productive capacity, technological capability, and crucially, climate resilience through approaches like CSA.
Right. Which leads us to our final provocative thought for you, our listener, to mull over.
We noted earlier that agricultural income in India is currently exempt from income tax. This is largely because the majority of farmers' incomes fall below the standard taxable threshold anyway.
But policy economists often argue that removing this exemption or finding ways to tax larger agricultural incomes could achieve several things. It could curb tax evasion by non-farmers showing income as agricultural, it could boost government revenues, and it could improve the quality of data on farm incomes, making credit assessment more reliable.
So here's the question. Given that agriculture is constitutionally a state subject, meaning states have primary legislative power, yet the challenges and the need for investment are national in scale, how effectively could a national policy navigate the complexities of taxing agricultural income, even if only for larger farms, to help fund the very reforms, the infrastructure, the R&D that everyone agrees are desperately needed to sustain the sector for the future?
It's a really tricky question of fiscal federalism, political feasibility, and policy design, something that requires deep structural thought.
Definitely something to think about.